I just hate to cut off that melody from Rabbi Baruch Chait, sung by our dear friend Moshe Storch at a Rosh Chodesh Hallel some time ago. Very excited to see Rabbi Baruch Chait in person at our premiere in Israel of Guns N' Moses, the Israeli premiere this coming Tuesday, God willing, at the Menachem Begin Center. And he's going to be there. He should come anyway, but especially because he also wrote the tune Kol Haolam Kulo, which is so well known based on the line of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. The whole world is a very narrow bridge, and the main thing is to have no fear at all. But that, I've told you this story before, but that melody to me is just so beautiful. It was written because a young man who was very, very ill, asked him to write a melody for him, and kind of on the spot. And Rabbi Chait said, "Do you have a verse for me?" And he said that, which is from Psalm 118. I will not die. What's the rest of the words? Wasn't planning on doing this. Psalms. Psalms. Tehillim. I shall not die but live. And declare the works of the Lord. There you go. And then Rabbi Chait just came up with that melody on the spot, and with my friends at our show, we just have sung that so many times and just really get into it. And one time Rabbi Chait was here in LA leading, beautiful kumzitz, and we just sang it with him and his guitar for on and on and on and on and on. Like the hair was standing up on my arms. It's just so beautiful. Anyway, I didn't want to cut it off once the class started. Okay, beautiful class today. We're doing DAF 43, Mem Gimel, here in Tractate Menachot, the 30th volume of the Talmud, continuing our discussion of Mishnah number 1 here in chapter 4. And still on the particulars of tzitzis. Really fascinating stuff. Our fringes that God commands us to wear on the corners of our garments throughout our generations to remind us of all of God's commandments and to do them. Okay. So we're picking this up right near the bottom of page 42b. The sages taught in a baraisa there is no reliable method of testing tekhelet. Right, so the tekhelet, the sky blue dye, right, sky blue dyed wool, which is that one string in our tzitzis, and that dye, it's not indigo, right? It comes from this very particular chilazon, which means snail. It's a particular snail. And it has to be that color, or it's unfit, it's the wrong color. You might as well just have white strings. And as we've learned, you can fulfill the mitzvah, and we have for thousands of years, when that snail, like we couldn't get it, it was too expensive. It was even forgotten exactly which snail it was. And so for so much of Jewish history, it was only white strings. But in modern times, there's enough opinions, not everybody for sure, but there are reputable opinions that we have found the right snail. We are producing the tekhelet again. And so people are starting to wear a tekhelet string within their tzitzis, on their daily tzitzis, on an arba konfot, or on their talis, on their prayer shawl. But for sure, it's not universal. Probably the majority of people in the Orthodox world are still not using tekhelet in their tzitzis. Chabad does not. They have only white strings. Okay, so now, back when they did, right, 1,500 to 2,000 years ago and more, what they're saying is, how do you know if you have purchased from somebody the correct blue strings? Maybe, it's much cheaper to get indigo and just dye it blue. How do you know you have the right blue? which would be fulfilling this mitzvah, and not just somebody, who's trying to make a buck off you by selling you something that is not true tekhelet, right? So there is no reliable method of testing the tekhelet, and therefore it may be purchased only from an expert. An expert means somebody that you can trust, that you can rely on, not only to know how to create tekhelet, but who is an upright, righteous, God-fearing person, and who takes his responsibility to create and market tekhelet, as a religious mission, right? He's on a mission, a spiritual mission, and you can trust him. So there is a method. So there is no reliable method of testing tekhelet, and therefore may be purchased only from an expert. There is a method of testing tefillin to ensure that they were written properly, but nevertheless, they may be purchased only from an expert as well, even though there is a method of testing. And there is a method of testing Torah scrolls and mezuzahs to see if they were written correctly, and they may be purchased from anyone. That's very interesting. There's no reliable way of testing the tekhelet. There is reliable way of testing tefillin, but still you can only buy from an expert. But when it comes to mezuzah and Torah scroll, you could see visually, was it written properly, and therefore you don't have to test. You don't have to purchase from an expert. Now the Gemara asks, and is there no method for testing tekhelet? But didn't Rav Yitzchak, the son of Rav Yehuda, test it to ensure that it was dyed with tekhelet? And the Gemara provides a mnemonic for this test that the Gemara will now lay out, which was carried out with items whose names contain the letters Gimel, Shin, and Mem. What would he do? He would bring megavia, which is alum clay, and that's megavia gila, and water of fenugreek, which is shavlita, and urine, which is meimei raglayim. Okay? Urine that was 40 days old. Whew. Now we're on page 43a. And he would soak the sky blue wool, the tekhelet, in this solution until morning. If its color would fade, the tekhelet was determined to be unfit, not true tekhelet, as it was not dyed with tekhelet derived from a chilazon, right, from this particular snail. If its color would not fade, then the tekhelet was determined to be fit. Right, now, indigo is a blue dye that's not made from a snail. I don't know what indigo dye is made from, probably some kind of a plant. Elon, let me know where indigo comes from. Is it a plant called indigo? I don't know what indigo comes from. And Rav Ada said before Rav, in the name of Rav Avira, one brings hard, now this is another test, one brings hard, arkesa, leavened barley dough, and bakes the tekhelet in it. And if the color of the tekhelet changes for the better, meaning that the process intensifies the color of the tekhelet, then it is fit. So if the color of the tekhelet changes for the worse, i.e. it fades, it is unfit. Right? So we have two different tests that can tell you whether the tekhelet is genuine or not. And your mnemonic is change reveals falsehood and change reveals truth. All this indicates that it is possible to test whether tekhelet has been dyed with real tekhelet, contrary to the Baraisa that told us there is no reliable way to test it. So now the Gemara explains what the Baraisa meant. What does it mean when it says there is no reliable method of testing tekhelet? It means that there is no way to test whether it was dyed for the sake of the mitzvah or for the purpose of testing the dye, right? You don't know, so there is a reliable test, but when they did the test, right, we learned yesterday that the wool that was used in that test and the dye that was used for that test can no longer be used for actually dyeing the tekhelet strings in tzitzit. What was used for the test was for the purpose of the test, and then you have to discard it. So then in your batch, right, that you have of the dye that you've made for the tekhelet, you take some out, you test that. If it's genuine tekhelet, if it's the right color, okay, then you discard the part that was used for the test, and you can use the rest of the batch. But if they took some directly from the batch to test it, that would render the batch unfit because it's as if the whole batch was made for the purpose of testing, not for the purpose of the tekhelet. And there's no way to know whether the person who's doing this tested it properly and took out a sample for the test and didn't take directly from the batch of the dye. Right? You have to trust that the person knew all the laws, adhered to the laws, was really, had focused on fulfilling the law when he did that. There's no way to know. So the Gemara relates that Mar, a sage from Mashche, brought tekhelet in the years when Rav Achai was a preeminent sage, and they tested it in the manner described by Rav Yitzchak, the son of Rav Yehuda, and its color faded, so it was unfit. But then they did the second test. They then tested in the manner described by Rav Ada, and the color changed for the better. So it failed the first test, and it passed the second test. So the sages thought that the tekhelet should be deemed unfit because it did not pass the first test. Rav Achai said to them, but how could it be that this wool is not tekhelet, as it failed one of the tests, and it is also not indigo, as it passed the other test? This is impossible because it must be one or the other. In other words, they only had two ways to achieve blue at this time, either indigo or tekhelet. Since it passed the second test, it's not indigo. So we don't know why it failed the first test, but it must be tekhelet. So what are we going to do? So rather conclude from it that these laws were stated together. In other words, if you pass the first test, you're good. If you fail the first test, you move on to the second test, right? Bump it up to the second higher testing. And if it passes that, then you're still good. If you fail both tests, must be indigo. Don't buy from that person. You can't use it. Did we find out what indigo is?
Yeah, it's a plant.
It's a plant. Okay, thank you. He explains, in a case where we tested in the wool in the manner described by Rav Yitzchak, the son of Rav Yehuda, and its color did not fade, it is fit and requires no further testing. If its color faded, then we test in the manner described by Rav Ada with hard leavened barley dough. If the color changed for the better, it is fit. If the color changed for the worse, it is unfit. And the Gemara adds, they sent a message from there, meaning from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel. These laws were in fact stated together as explained by Rav Achai. That's the idea. First level test, you pass it, you're good. If you fail the first test, go up and do the second test. The Gemara relates that Rabbi Mani was exacting and purchased tekhelet in accordance with the stringencies of the Baraisa cited earlier, i.e. that the wool dyed as a test is unfit for tzitzit, and that therefore one should purchase tekhelet for tzitzit only from an expert, right? A dedicated, righteous expert. A certain elder said to him, this is what your early predecessors did, and their businesses were successful. The sages taught in a Baraisa, in the case of one who purchases a cloak with tzitzis already on it from the marketplace, if he purchased it from a Jew, it retains its presumptive status that it is fit for the mitzvah. If he purchased it from a Gentile, then, if he purchased it from a merchant, it is presumed to be fit, as the merchant would want to maintain his credibility and would therefore purchase a tekhelet only from a reliable source. But if he purchased it from a Gentile who is an ordinary person rather than a professional merchant, then the tekhelets are unfit, as the seller presumably dyed them himself, and who knows what he thought he was doing or where he got the law. He's certainly not an expert. And even though the sages said a person is not permitted to sell a cloak with tzitzis on it to a Gentile until he unties and removes the tzitzis, it is permitted to purchase such a cloak from a Gentile merchant, as it is assumed that the merchant acquired the cloak from a Jew who ignored this law. And the Gemara asks, what is the reason for the prohibition against selling a cloak with tzitzis to a Gentile? And the Gemara answers, here they interpreted that it is prohibited because of the concern that the Gentile will visit a prostitute and observers will think that he is a Jew. Alternatively, Rav Yehuda said it is prohibited lest a Jew mistake the Gentile for a Jew and accompany him on a journey thinking that he is also Jewish due to his tzitzis, and the Gentile might then kill him. All right, so you can see. Oh, thank you. I forgot to light the candle. Let's light up the darkness. Someone noticed. Thank you for the reminder, everybody. So first of all, you can see that, the idea that we're living among neighbors who might hate us or wish us harm is something that we've had to be concerned about for a long time, for thousands of years. So there were two reasons, right? One, that you might come to put yourself in a dangerous situation because you might be around people that you think are Jews, are not Jews, and who might mean you harm. The other is that you might end up in a situation where you make a chilul Hashem, right? Where you desecrate the name of God. And that's because a person who's wearing tzitzis is presumably a pious person who's dedicating himself to following the commandments of the Torah, visibly so. And then if he ends up in a situation where he's doing something that obviously violates the commandments, like frequenting or visiting a house of ill repute, so that's a disgrace. It desecrates the name of God. It's a disgrace to the Jewish people if he's doing that. And there's lower level types of desecration of the name. And I told you, we're talking a little bit yesterday and the day before, the reason is given why we wear tzitzis, so that when we look at them, we're reminded of all the commandments and to do them. And so presumably, if you have them tucked inside your clothes where you don't see them, you're a little bit interfering with that aspect of the mitzvah. You're still fulfilling the mitzvah. You don't have to have them out in order to fulfill the mitzvah, for sure. You are yotze, right? You are fulfilling your obligation of having tzitzis on your garment and of being a person who's wearing tzitzis if they're on you, but they're tucked in. So why would we tuck them in? And, I'll just share and be a little vulnerable here. When I first reconnected and started to, become religious again 20 years ago, and I really knew very little. I was just beginning my journey as a Baal Tshuva, right, as becoming newly religious, newly observant. But I was saying the Shema every day, and it said, you shall put fringes on the corners of your garments throughout your generation, and put a blue thread in the fringe on the corner, so whenever you look at the fringe, you're reminded of all my commandments and to do them. I said, well, okay, I'll start doing that. And I kind of thought they looked cool, So back then, I was typically wearing a straw fedora and a kind of bowling shirt, like that was untucked. And the tzitzis would hang down, and there they were. I'm a religious Jew. I'm fulfilling my obligation, even though I was definitely not Orthodox, and I didn't think through what I was doing. So, among other things that I shouldn't have done at that time, I would wear my tzitzis out and go to a non-kosher restaurant. You do not do that. That is a real no-no for a bunch of reasons. For one thing, a Jew might see you going in there and think it is a kosher restaurant because you, a guy with tzitzis, went in there. He might make that assumption and end up eating non-kosher food thinking it was kosher. And there's other reasons not to do it. And so, later in my journey when I realized, I really should not have done that or go to other places I shouldn't have been in, kind of embarrassed. I was like, I'm not going to fly this flag because, I don't really know what I'm doing. I could embarrass myself and my people and, do something wrong before God. And so I started tucking them in. And so I've mostly kept them tucked in. Sometimes I wear them out, especially to shul. But I feel like, I know the law better now. I'm not saying I'm going to make a commitment right now in front of you to wear them out all the time. But I'm getting there. I think I need to wear them out more, particularly for the purpose of reminding me. And it does have this other thing that it does. Once you become aware that you're more visibly Jewish, so then you have to make a Kiddush Hashem, right? A person who's visibly Jewish has to hold himself to a higher standard, be more generous, more honest, more kind, more ready, to help the senior citizen cross the street, more ready to give charity to a poor person. Because you're flying the flag, as it were. So these are some of the considerations that go into that. Okay. Rav Yehuda would affix white and tekhelet strings to the garment of his wife. And every morning he would recite the blessing to wrap ourselves in garments with tzitzit, right? It's interesting to wrap ourselves in garments, mitzvah, tzitzit. I don't know if it's to wrap ourselves, right? Recite tzitzit. Okay, so that's the bracha that we say when we put on a talis. Not the bracha, not the blessing we say when we put on the tzitzit that's under our shirt that I'm talking about would be hanging out as I'm walking around. To wrap ourselves in tzitzit, in a garment with tzitzit, we say that when we wrap our prayer shawl, our talis around us. At any rate, he would put his right, so in right, he attached tzitzit to the garment of his wife, and he would recite the blessing to wrap ourselves in tzitzit. So very interesting. Why isn't she saying the bracha? Why is he saying it? And why is he putting a garment with tzitzit on his wife? Let's keep talking about that. The Gemara asks, from the fact that he would affix tzitzit to his wife's garments, it is apparent that he holds that the obligation of tzitzit is a positive mitzvah that is not time-bound, because women are not obligated in time-bound positive mitzvahs. So he must have felt that that tzitzit is not time-bound. What does it mean, not time-bound? It means you're obligated in tzitzit all the time, right? Not just certain times, like every day during daylight. And so according to him, therefore, women are also obligated in it. But if that is his opinion, why did he recite the blessing on tzitzit each and every morning? In order for the mitzvah not to be time-bound, it must apply at night, in which case a new blessing would not be recited in the morning. When you put it on, it's on. You're always on. You keep it on all the time, and you only put it on the blessing the first time you put it on, then you just keep it on. Why would he say the blessing every morning? So the Gemara answers that Rav Yehuda was acting in accordance with the opinion of Rebbe. As it is taught in a baraisa with regard to tefillin, every time one dons them, he recites the blessing over them, even several times in one day. This is the statement of Rebbe, again, from the time when they used to wear tefillin all the time. So they take it off. According to this opinion, they would say the bracha, the blessing again, when they put it back on. Now, the Gemara asks, if so, he should have also recited the blessing every time that he took the cloak off and put it back on, and not merely once a day in the morning. So the Gemara answers, Rav Yehuda was a modest man, and he did not remove his cloak the entire day. And so the Gemara asks, in what way is it different from the morning? I.e., why did he recite a blessing in the morning? And the Gemara answers, he recited the blessing in the morning when he changed from a nighttime garment to a daytime garment. Now, this is not the halacha. We do not wear tzitzit at night, and we'll discuss more why. Period. We don't wear tzitzit at night. We certainly don't wear them to bed. Now, the sages taught in a baraisa, everyone is obligated in the mitzvah of tzitzit, including priests, Levites, Yisraels, right? So that would be all the Jews, right? The three classes, priest, Levite, and Israel. Converts, women, and non-Jewish slaves, right? Canaanite slaves. The Rabbi Shimon deems women exempt because the mitzvah of tzitzit is a positive time-bound mitzvah, because we don't wear them at night, so therefore we have to put them on every morning. That's a time-bound positive commandment, and women are exempt from time-bound positive commandments. And this is the law. We follow Rabbi Shimon, not those earlier sages. Women are not obligated in tzitzit. Not obligated. Are they permitted? Are they permitted to wear tzitzit? This is a little bit beyond the scope of the class. There's a lot of issues that go on with this. And I just did some very quick research before the class. But the bottom line is there's even an opinion apparently from Moshe Feinstein that women are permitted. If they're going to do it, it's something they have to take seriously, something they should definitely consult with their rabbi and see how they're going to do it, how they're going to go about it. It's something that they're not obligated to do. It's something they are permitted to do. But you will find different opinions on this subject for sure. And then there's definitely a question about if they are going to do it, how they're doing it, and are they going to wear it outwardly? Because when you take on something that is permitted but not obligated, it's deemed important to be modest about it. Very interesting. So I'm not a rabbi. If this is something that interests you, do more further research and talk to your rabbi about it. Okay. But the law is women are not obligated in wearing tzitzis because it's a time-bound positive mitzvah. Now, the Gemara analyzes the Baraisa. The master said in the Baraisa, everyone is obligated in the mitzvah of tzitzis, including priests, Levites, and Israelites. And so the Gemara asks, isn't that obvious? As if priests, Levites, and Israelites were exempt from the mitzvah, who then is to be obligated, right? That's all Jewish men fall either into priests, Levites, or Israelites, right? Priests are a subset of the Levites. Levites are one of the tribes. I'm a Levite. We're the descendants of Levi, one of the 12 brothers of the sons of Jacob. And then the Israelites is everybody else. So if they're not obligated, who be obligated? So the Gemara answers, it was necessary for the Baraisa to mention that priests are obligated to fulfill the mitzvah, as it might enter your mind to say as follows. Since it is written, you shall not wear diverse kinds, wool and linen together, right? Shatnez, the prohibition on wearing wool and linen together. You shall prepare yourself twisted cords upon the four corners of your covering, right? So we've seen before that you will wear, if it's the only way to fulfill the mitzvah, wool tzitzis on a linen cloak. This would not violate shatnez because the obligation of tzitzis comes and overrides shatnez. Now, shatnez applies to everybody, but there is an exception for priests. They're also prohibited to wear shatnez in their normal clothing every day. But when they serve in the temple, in the holy temple, the clothing of a priest who's doing the avoda, doing the worship service in the holy temple when it was standing in Jerusalem, they actually were obligated to wear shatnez. So they do have different laws that apply to them. And so you might have thought that since already they are wearing shatnez when they're serving as priests, maybe they're not obligated in tzitzis like everybody else because they have different rules for them. To counter this, we had to learn that priests are obligated in tzitzis. Right? Since it is written, you shall not wear diverse kinds, wool and linen together, you shall prepare yourself twisted cords upon the four corners of your covering in Deuteronomy 22:11 and 12. Only one who is not permitted to wear shatnez is obligated in the mitzvah of tzitzis. And with regard to these priests, since shatnez are permitted for them when they perform the temple service, as the belt of the priestly vestments contains shatnez, maybe they should not be obligated in the mitzvah of tzitzis. Therefore, the Baraisa teaches us that although the prohibition of shatnez is permitted for them at the time that they perform the temple service, when it is not the time of the temple service, it is not permitted. And therefore, priests are obligated in the mitzvah of tzitzis throughout the day. Now, the Baraisa states that Rabbi Shimon deems women exempt from tzitzis, that they're not obligated. So the Gemara asks, what is the reasoning of Rabbi Shimon? And the Gemara answers, as it is taught in Baraisa with regard to tzitzis, it is stated, and it shall be unto you for a fringe, for tzitzis, that you may look upon it and remember all the commandments of the Lord. Numbers 15:39. And the term that you may look excludes a nighttime garment, as it is dark at night and it is therefore difficult to see. Since you don't wear it at night, you have to put them on every morning, and that's how it ends up being a time-bound positive commandment. So the Baraisa continues, but wait a minute. One could ask, do you say that the verse serves to exclude a nighttime garment? Why not say that it excludes the garment of a blind person who is also unable to see his tzitzis? And the Tan explains, when the verse states, of your covering with which you cover yourself, the garment of a blind person is mentioned as being included, as the verse already stated, of your covering, and did not need to state with which you cover yourself. If so, how do I realize the meaning of the exclusion that you may look upon it? It must be to exclude nighttime garments when you can't see it, rather than to exclude the garment of a blind person because he can't see it. We already have a different way to resolve the issue of a blind person. So the Gemara asks, what did you see that led you to include the garment of a blind person from the phrase with which you cover yourself, and to exclude a nighttime garment from the phrase that you may look upon it, rather than including a nighttime garment in the obligation and excluding the garment of a blind person? You could have reversed how you're interpreting these phrases within the commandment. So the Gemara answers, I include the garment of a blind person because it is visible to others, even though the blind person himself can't see it. And I exclude a nighttime garment, which is not visible even to others. So the Gemara asks, and the rabbis who disagree with Rabbi Shimon, right, who are saying that women are obligated in tzitzis, what do they do with, i.e., how do they interpret this verse with which you cover yourself? Now we're on page 43b. And the Gemara answers that the rabbis require it for that which is taught in a baraisa. The phrase, on the four corners of your garment, in Deuteronomy 22:12, indicates that one is required to attach tzitzis to a garment that has four corners, but not to one that has three corners. And the baraisa continues, do you say that a garment with four corners is obligated, but a garment with three corners is not? Or perhaps we can interpret this phrase differently. Or is it teaching only that the garment with four corners is obligated, but not a garment that has five corners? When the verse states, with which you cover yourself, a garment with five corners is thereby mentioned in the verse as being obligated. Then how do I realize the meaning of on the four corners of your garment? It teaches that the obligation is limited to a garment that has four corners, but not to one that has three corners. A five-cornered garment has four corners. It merely has more, but it has four corners. A three-cornered garment does not have four corners. And the Gemara challenges this again and says, but what did you see that led you to include a garment with five corners and exclude a garment with three corners, rather than including a garment with three corners and excluding a garment with five corners? And the Gemara answers, I include a garment with five corners because five includes four, and I exclude a garment with three corners as three does not include four. And how does Rabbi Shimon derive the law that a five-cornered garment is required to have tzitzis? The Gemara answers, he derives it from the seemingly extraneous word with which, asher, you cover yourself. And the Gemara asks, and what do the rabbis derive from this word? And the Gemara answers, they don't learn anything from this word. They just think it's part of the syntax of the phrase. The Gemara asks, and as for the rabbis, what do they do with the phrase that you may look upon it, from which Rabbi Shimon derives that a nighttime garment is exempt? The Gemara answers, they require it for that which is taught in a baraisa, the verse, that you may look upon it and remember, teaches that one should see the mitzvah of tzitzis and remember another mitzvah that is contingent on it. And which mitzvah is that? Which commandment is that? It is the mitzvah of the recitation of the Shema, which we do in the morning and in the night. As we learned in a Mishna, tractate Brachas, page 9b, from when may one recite the Shema in the morning? From when one can distinguish between the tekhelet and the white strings of his tzitzis, right? When it's dark outside, you can maybe see that somebody's wearing strings, but you can't tell the difference between the blue and the white. When there's enough light in the sky that you can distinguish the blue from the white, that's when you say the morning Shema. Or that's the first time that you can say the morning Shema. You can say it also a little bit later than that, but you can't say it before that. And it is taught in another baraisa, the phrase that you may look upon it and remember, teaches that one should see this mitzvah of tzitzis and remember another mitzvah that is adjacent to it in the Torah. And which mitzvah is that? It is the mitzvah of shatnez, the prohibition on wearing wool and linen together, as it is written, you shall not wear diverse kinds, wool and linen together. You shall prepare yourself twisted cords, which are the tzitzis. It was taught in another baraisa. The verse states that you may look upon it and remember all the commandments of the Lord. That's not in Deuteronomy. That's in Numbers 15:39. And this indicates that once a person is obligated in the mitzvah of tzitzis, he is obligated in all the mitzvahs. And the Gemara comments, and this is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, who says that the tzitzis are a positive, time-bound mitzvah, and women are exempt from it. Only men are obligated in all the mitzvahs, including positive time-bound mitzvahs, just as they are obligated in the mitzvah of tzitzis, right? Whereas women are not obligated in time-bound positive mitzvahs. They're obligated in some time-bound positive mitzvahs, like eating in a sukkah during sukkahs and hearing shofar, but there's other time-bound positive mitzvahs that they are not obligated in. And why were they given this exemption? We've discussed this at other times, but for sure one of them is that the women were the primary caregivers in their homes, right, for children. And children don't care what your obligations are. They make their demands all day long. And so it was a mercy to women that already they're working hard enough. They don't have to do these kinds of time-bound positive commandments. It is taught in another baraisa, the verse states, that you may look upon it and remember all the commandments of the Lord. And this teaches that the commandment of tzitzis is equivalent to all the mitzvahs of the Torah. That's a strong statement, right? It's very important. And by the way, there is a kind of modern phenomena going on in Israel, especially since October 7th, when the old saying, no atheists in a foxhole. But also, throughout the world, as Jew hatred increases, Jewish pride increases. A lot of people are connecting with the tradition, with our people, with God through the tradition. And so, for example, wearing a kippah, right? That's not a commandment. That's a custom. It's a very well-established, broad custom. And so religious people will always keep their head covered. But you're starting to see, especially in Israel, people wearing tzitzis who aren't wearing a kippah. Right? Very interesting. Like, they're not religious. They want you to know that they're not very religious, but they are moved by the Torah expressly written commandment of tzitzis. And there's a certain measure of protection that tzitzis provide. And in part, it's because what you hear right here, fulfilling the mitzvah of tzitzis, is equivalent, according to this teaching, to all the mitzvahs. It also inspires a person to start, learning more, and eventually he'll come to perhaps do more mitzvahs. But it's a wonderful place to start. As I said before, you have to think through carefully if you're going to wear them out or not. But taking on the mitzvah, and by the way, as a lot of Chabad rabbis will tell you, some people will say, I don't want to take on a mitzvah because I'm not ready to commit to do that every day. Okay. So don't commit to do it every day. You don't have to commit to do it every day. Maybe you'll come to do it every day later, but don't let that fear stop you from trying on the mitzvah. You can be a little bit playful and try the mitzvah. At least do it once, because any mitzvah that you do even once, that's a credit to you that is with you forever and you'll carry into the next world. And performing one mitzvah may lead to another mitzvah. So don't feel that I'm not ready to take that on because I'm not ready to do it every day. Okay, you don't have to do it every day. Take it on for one day. Maybe take it on once a week, once a month. Maybe that'll lead to every day. But do any mitzvah. When you get an opportunity to do a mitzvah, do a mitzvah. This would be a great moment to say, you know what, I'm going to challenge myself and do the following mitzvah. Whatever it is that you've been thinking about, make a commitment. Make a commitment. And maybe it's tzitzis because you heard this teaching right now. And it is taught in another baraisa. The verse states that you may look upon it and remember all the commandments of the Lord and do them. And this teaches that looking at the tzitzis leads to remembering the other mitzvahs. And remembering them leads to doing them. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, anyone who is diligent in the mitzvah of tzitzis merits receiving the divine presence. Wow. Receiving the divine presence. That means literally experiencing the presence of God in your life, so that it won't just be an intellectual idea. There'll be some kind of experience in your life of experiencing the divine presence. Wow. It is written here that you may look upon it, oiso or oito, Numbers 15:39. And it is written there, you shall fear the Lord your God, and him, oto, shall you serve. So, just as oto in that verse is referring to the divine presence, so too in this verse, it is referring to the divine presence. The sages taught in the Baraisa, the Jewish people are beloved, as the Holy One, blessed be He, surrounded them with mitzvahs. Right? The fact that we're obligated in all these commandments, sometimes people feel like, I have to do so many different things, it's so hard. But it's a sign of tremendous love that God is interested in us and gave us these ways to connect with Him and to fulfill His will and to be a Yid, right? Thank God, it's good to be a Yid. It's geschmack to be a Yid. It's tasty to be a Yid. And it's because God loves us that He gave us all these commandments. They have tefillin on their heads and tefillin on their arm and tzitzit on their garments and a mezuzah on their doorways. And concerning them, David, right, King David said, 7 times a day I praise you because of your righteous ordinances, from Psalm 119. And this alludes to the 2 tefillin, the 4 tzitzis, and the mezuzah, which totals 7. And when David entered the bathhouse, and he saw himself standing naked, he said, woe to me that I stand naked without any mitzvah. But once he remembered the mitzvah of milah, of circumcision, that was in his flesh at all times, his mind was put at ease as he realized that he was still accompanied by this mitzvah. After he left the bathhouse, he recited a song about the mitzvah of milah, as it is stated in the verse, for the leader on the Sheminis, a psalm of David in Psalm 12. This is interpreted as a psalm about milah, about circumcision, which was given to be performed on the 8th, B'Shemini, the day of the baby's life. Same word. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, anyone who has tefillin on his head, tefillin on his arm, tzitzis on his garment, and a mezuzah on his doorway is strengthened from all sides so that he will not sin. As it is stated in the verse, and a 3-fold cord is not quickly broken. Ecclesiastes 4:12. And this is interpreted as an allusion to the 3 mitzvahs of tefillin, tzitzis, and mezuzah. And the verse states, the angel of the Lord encamps round about them that fear him and delivers them. Now, is it so that everyone who's religious, everyone that has tzitzis, everyone that wears tefillin, everyone that has a mezuzah, is absolutely protected from all harm and, lives to 120 every time? No, of course not. But does a life of mitzvahs and adhering to God provide an additional protection that you would not have otherwise? Yes. This is interpreted to mean that the angel of the Lord surrounds those who fulfill the mitzvahs and saves them from sin. And sin can be very harmful to a person, both in this world and the next. I already said a bracha on this water earlier. It is taught in a baraisa that Rabbi Meir would say, what is different about tekhelet from all other types of colors, such that it was chosen for the mitzvah of tzitzis? It is because tekhelet is similar in its color to the sea. And the sea is similar to the sky. And the sky is similar to the throne of glory. As it is stated, and they saw the God of Israel, and there was under his feet the like of a paved work of sapphire stone, and the like of the very heaven for clearness, indicating that the sky is like a sapphire brickwork. And it is written, the likeness of a throne, as the appearance of a sapphire stone. It is taught in a baraisa that Rabbi Meir would say the punishment for not attaching white strings is greater than the punishment for not attaching sky blue strings, despite the fact that the blue strings, the tekhelet, are more important. And Rabbi Meir illustrates. So why is right? If somehow it's two mitzvahs that you're fulfilling when you have the tekhelet, right? Tzitzit, you're fulfilling tzitzit when you have white strings, and then if you add the blue string, you're also fulfilling the tekhelet commandment. So the tekhelet is a little bit higher and holier. So why is it that if somebody omits tekhelet, okay, he had an opportunity to do a mitzvah and he didn't do it. And if he omits the white strings, he had an opportunity to do a mitzvah and he didn't do it. And it's worse if you omit the white strings. Why? So Rabbi Meir explains this with a parable. This is comparable to a king of flesh and blood who said to his two subjects that they must bring him a seal, like a signet ring, right? Or that a king uses to seal documents. And the king said to one of them, bring me a seal made of clay. And he said to the other one, bring me a seal made of gold. And both of them were negligent and did not bring the seals. Which one of them will have a greater punishment? You must say that it is the one to whom he said, bring me a seal of clay. And despite its availability and low cost, he did not bring it. Right? So it's not, especially in times in history, it was very difficult to have the blue string, the tekhelet, but the white string was always available. Now we have the blue string again. The white string's always been available. So if you're not doing tzitzit at all, bigger punishment. It is taught in a baraisa that Rabbi Meir would say, a person is obligated to recite 100 blessings every day, as it is stated in the verse, and now, Israel, what does the Lord your God require of you? What? Ma does the Lord require of you? In Deuteronomy 10:12. And Rabbi Meir interprets the verse as though it said me'ah, which is 100. Right? So what does he require of you? 100. What's 100? 100 blessings. So the Gemara relates that on Shabbos and festivals, when the prayers contain fewer blessings, Rav Yehuda, the son of Rav Avia, made an effort to fill this quota of blessings with blessings on spices and sweet fruit, of which he would partake in order to recite extra blessings. I'm almost done. Questions or comments, please get them in now. Okay. It is taught in a baraisa that Rabbi Meir would say, a man is obligated to recite 3 blessings every day, praising God for his kindnesses. And these blessings are, who did not make me, right? Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who did not make me a Gentile, and same beginning, who did not make me a woman, and who did not make me an ignoramus. Now, we don't say the third one, who did not make me an ignoramus. We don't say that. We say who did not make me a slave. But the idea who did not make me a Gentile, who did not make me a woman, that we thank God and praise God for that, people will look to that blessing in a Hebrew prayer book and say, oh, you see this religion, it's patriarchal, it's sexist, it's arrogant, it's somehow demeaning to non-Jews. That's not what's implied here. The reason we praise God for that is because we're men, right, and because we're free men, we are obligated in a lot more rules, right? Because I'm not a slave, and because I'm a man and not a woman, there are many more commandments that I must adhere to, that I must follow, and we say thank you. Thank you for giving me more commandments that I must follow, rather than complaining about it. Right? Rav Acha bar Yaakov heard his son reciting the blessing, who did not make me an ignoramus. And Rav Acha bar Yaakov said to him, is it in fact proper to go this far in reciting blessings? And Rav Acha bar Yaakov's son said to him, well, rather, what blessing should one recite? If you will say that one should recite, who did not make me a slave, that is the same as a woman. Not because women are slaves, but because both slaves and women are not obligated in time-bound positive commandments. So why should one recite 2 blessings about the same matter? And Rav Acha bar Yaakov answered him, nevertheless, a slave is more lowly than a woman, and therefore it is appropriate to recite an additional blessing on not having been born a slave. And that is the blessing that we say. We don't praise God for not making me an ignoramus, which is interesting because you might say, thank you, God, for giving me the capacity to understand, right, to have a brain that can learn. And we do thank him for that in the Amidah and in the morning blessings. I mean, we thank him for the understanding to distinguish between various things. Being an ignoramus, that's not something that God makes you or doesn't make you, right? An ignoramus is somebody who had the opportunity to learn and didn't. That's in our control. And that's where we will stop. We're right at the top of 44a. I'm going to take some comments. And we have, as I mentioned, class tomorrow, Saturday night. And then the good Lord willing, no war begins, please God. I'll be flying to Israel on Sunday, and so then we'll be off for 9 days, God willing, while I'm over there, for the various screenings of Guns N' Moses in Israel. So if everything goes as planned, we won't have class next week, but we will have class tomorrow night, Saturday night, when Shabbos ends in LA. Okay. Lucy. Indigo dye is an ancient pigment created through the process of turning leaves from the Indigofera plant into powder, boiling the powder down into a rich liquid, and then fermenting the dye until it can provide its distinctive blue color. Thank you. I didn't know that. I was wondering how blue is made from indigo. Cheryl, isn't the blue color from a rare snail? Yes. The chilazon likely refers to the Murex trunculus. I happen to have a picture right here. That is the Murex trunculus. It's a type of sea snail, and that's the particular snail from which the tekhelet dye was made and is being made again. Some will argue that we don't really know which they used to use in the past, and that's why we and how they extracted the dye, and therefore, and what exactly was the shade, and that's why they are not ready to go back to using the tekhelet now. And others say we have figured it out, and you can wear tekhelet now. Thank you, Cheryl. Renee, I wore tzitzit for years and tucked or hid it. I stopped when once, while walking in Big Bear Village, the fringes became visible under my jacket, and it was noticed by some frum men who became upset. I had consulted with several rabbis before undertaking to wear them, but after this incident, I didn't feel comfortable since I wasn't obligated and because it caused upset. Even while trying to be modest about it, I couldn't guarantee that it wouldn't show and cause offense. There's a lot of issues, right, involved in this, and this is definitely something, to work out on your own, carefully, really think it through, talk with your rabbi, and there's all kinds of things that women have that men don't have, and that they have their own ways of connecting with God, with the tradition that are not available to men. And one thing that is very clear in the tradition, we see it over and over again. I can't believe I got signed out while I'm sitting here talking with you. So I can see the rest of the questions, but give me a second. But this idea that you have to work it out on your own carefully. Sorry. This is nuts. Okay. 028592 028592. Got it. No, I'm okay. It's coming back. But working it out very carefully and thinking it through. And I love what this story that you're sharing, Renee, and how you arrived at it carefully. Then there was an incident, made you rethink. And I'm not a rabbi. I'm not telling people how they should conduct themselves about this. I'm just saying that the issues are complex. And it's good to discuss with somebody who's quite expert in these laws. But what I was saying is that in Judaism, it's very much a tradition and a law that makes distinctions. We're not all the same. We're not all the same. Old people are not the same as young people. Men are not the same as women. Jews are not the same as non-Jews. Levites are not the same as Kohanim. And we are all, blessed with our individual paths and journeys. They each have their own challenges and they each have their own opportunities. Sharon, what is interesting in customs is that a little boy becomes 3 years old. He has his first haircut. I was at one yesterday in Up Sharon. He has his first haircut and he gets his first tzitzis katan. And the first tzitzis katan was traditionally made by a mother or grandmother. And I've seen some beautiful ones at Up Sharon ceremonies, right? And that's an interesting question, right? Can a woman tie tzitzis if she's not obligated in tzitzis? And apparently the answer is yeah. Again, there's more to it than that, but we have seen that Jewish women can make and tie tzitzis even though they're not obligated in it, which is quite an interesting feature about that law. Now says Sharon, but since women are obligated in the Shema, which commands tzitzis, how does that not follow the obligations within it? I don't know. It's an interesting question because you would think if women are obligated in Shema, that's an exception to the women are not obligated in time-bound positive commandments because Shema is a time-bound positive commandment. So why is exception made here and not there? Above my pay grade. Ask our sages of blessed memory. And Renee says, isn't it also taught that we must conform to the minhag, the custom of the community in such matters? And this is why I stopped wearing this talis katan, right? The tzitzis that goes on your clothes. In Big Bear, maybe now I can where I live. My friend of blessed memory wore hers outside as a teacher in D.C. and Washington in a Jewish day school. Again, lots of complex issues here. Discuss with your local Orthodox rabbi. That's what I've got for us today. And with God's help, see you tomorrow after Shabbos ends, I think about 7:30ish here in LA. And wasn't this a great DAF? This was absolutely fascinating. I should have called it a key DAF, and we are now going to label it a key DAF. This is definitely a key DAF. So with God's help, see you tomorrow. Have a great Shabbos, and please God, may we enter Shabbos and during Shabbos and leaving Shabbos only hear good news. Let us say Amen.